What's cracking, peeps? Darren McDuffie here, alias Fat Man, helping you become perfectly healthy and toned and conscious. Wanted to tell you how I got rid of a headache just the other day, and all makes sense as I go through this. But I had a headache last Saturday, and I also had a presentation I was doing, and I know that I didn't need the headache. Just really didn't need that headache. And I was doing my morning walk, which I come to the park every morning and do my walk and walk around the lake. And the headache started, and I left the park and I went to a grocery store. And while I'm walking around the grocery store, I had a few items to pick up. I'm walking around the grocery store. I just started asking myself in my mind, I said, well, what is bothering me? What is bothering me? And I pinpointed one thing that I hadn't dealt with that was actually bothering me. And when I pinpointed that one thing, I just started to soothe myself. Started to talk to myself in a better feeling way. I said, there's nothing going wrong here. All is well. All is well. And by the time I got to the checkout counter, my headache was gone. And it was just that simple. There are a lot of us out here who are encountering a lot of chronic illness. When you look at us as a society, you're more apt to see someone who is sick than you're apt to see someone who is doing really well, who is really in good health. One of the reasons why that is so is because a lot of us tend to ignore our negative indicators, because that's what illness is. Illness is just a negative indicator that comes up in the body, it manifests in the body for something that you haven't dealt with. We have been taught to suppress our emotions, not to feel anything. Most of the time, we're in our heads and we're not in our hearts. We're not feeling enough. We're constantly in our heads, but very rarely are we in our hearts. And I got to pick up my shades here. But rarely, again, are we in our hearts. A lot of people have been taught to go to see a specialist. Get this person, get that person, find out what's wrong with me, let them give me the right medication so I can take it, and then that will alleviate my illness. But how successful are we with that? A lot of people have had conditions that they've had for a very long time, and they've not been able to get any relief for that illness. And that's because, again, we are so geared towards action. Action. If I have something, I have to do the right action to take it. If I'm overweight, I got to get to the gym to do the right action, to exercise and finally do something about this thing that I have. We never, ever really think about sitting down with ourselves, being still, and getting in touch with our emotions, being what I would call a term sensitive. There's nothing wrong with being sensitive. Our emotions were put in place to help us guide towards what feels good and what doesn't feel so good. And most of us want to gravitate toward what feels good. But when we have an illness, when we have these negative indicators that come up in our lives, we tend to bury those and we never really get in touch. And it's so very simple to get in touch with what's wrong, what's bothering me, and soothe it at that point. But what happens with a lot of us is we begin to bury the stuff, and then we have these chronic thought patterns that go on, these negative thought patterns that continuously go on. We keep playing that loop, and something that's small then begins to be major. And that's why you see a lot of people out here who may start with fatigue. They're constantly tired, and then after that fatigue, then bam, something happens. Some big major illness comes down the road from that. And that's only because we've not been able to deal with the things that we've been bearing emotionally. I want to talk about just two really conditions that I've been seeing in the health and wellness sphere that I believe are all about just taking that emotional journey. The first one is thyroid. A lot of people are having thyroid issues, especially women. And my theory on this is that a lot of women have been taught to be people pleasers. You know, they're taught to please everyone around them except for themselves. And therefore, when they don't please people or they don't give what they're supposed to give in our society, then they have this thing where they don't want to speak up. If you're having a thyroid issue, most of the time it's about speaking up, and a lot of women tend to suppress that. They're thought that they're supposed to be just shy, demure woman, and they're not supposed to speak up for what they want and what they believe. So therefore, that manifests as a thyroid condition. But what if you got in touch with yourself emotionally and believed that, hey, you know what, I love myself, and when someone says something to me or I'm not pleasing someone, then I can speak up about that. There's nothing wrong with that. No one wants you to be this zombie that walks around and is scared to say what you mean. And I know our society tends to call women the B word if they speak up, if they believe something and they don't want to let people trample over them. The next thing is weight. A lot of people have weight issues. A lot of people are having weight issues. Weight is about protection. What are you protecting yourself from? Are you protecting yourself from your spouse? Are you protecting yourself from a job that you don't like? Are you protecting yourself from society? Someone has placed some label on you and you feel like you have to live up to that label and you're not living up to it, and therefore you are protecting yourself. These two conditions, again, are very easy to get in touch with. Ask yourself, what's really bothering me? And a lot of people fear that intimacy with themselves. They don't want to sit down. They don't want to figure out, hey, what's really going on with me? They'll rather go out and do the action. And when the action fails, then their recourse is nothing works for me. Try doing something emotionally first and then do the action. I'm not telling you not to do the action. I'm just saying try doing something emotionally first. Get in tune with what's actually bothering you and then go out and do the action. I promise you, you'll be way more successful. And that's the component that we're missing. That component of being sensitive enough to get out of our heads and get more into our hearts and start feeling what's actually going on with us, what's actually bothering me, what have I been playing in my head over and over again that I have not dealt with. And you'll be surprised how simple it is and how things will pop up if you just ask. And then once you ask, you release that resistance, and then you give that space, or you get into that space where you can finally get some relief from your illness and whatever you're feeling. So feel your feelings. Get in tune. Get in touch with what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. Darren McDuffie, alias Fat Man, helping you become perfectly healthy in tone and conscious. One love. I'm out, y'all.